Alara Vance didn't just study maps. She lived for them. She wasn't an archaeologist digging up bones, but a historical cartographer who pieced together the missing edges of the past. Her current obsession was the forgotten history of the Northern Seaways, a region officially declared unnavigable centuries ago, yet whispered about in old fishing villages. Her search led her not to a dusty museum vault, but to the forgotten, salt-laced attic of the oldest nautical library in the world, tucked away in the harbor district. The air in the attic was thick with the scent of brine and decaying paper, a perfume Alara found intoxicating. It was here, beneath a mountain of moldering logbooks and broken navigational tools, that she found it. It was not stored in a protective tube or a velvet-lined box. It was simply rolled and tied with brittle, sun-bleached cord, shoved carelessly behind a stack of damaged 18th-century tidal charts. Unfurling the map was a slow, agonizing process. The paper, a thick, vellum-like material, resisted her touch, groaning softly as she coaxed it flat. Beneath the protective plastic sheet she placed over it, the true nature of the artifact was revealed. It was titled, in faded, elegant script, Cartographia Obscura, or the Hidden Chart. It wasn't like any map she had ever seen. The outlines of the known continents were rough and inaccurate, suggesting an origin far older than any recorded exploration of the area. But the real shock was the detail in the uncharted void of the Northern Seaways, where official maps showed only blank space or the mythological Great Ice Barrier. This one displayed a dizzying complexity of channels, land masses, and, most unsettlingly, a series of geometric symbols that pulsed with a deep, almost unsettling indigo pigment. These weren't coastal markers or depth soundings. They looked like astronomical alignments superimposed on the geography. The map wasn't simply charting the sea. It was charting something under the sea, or perhaps something above it that influenced the geography. Alara's heart hammered a frantic rhythm against her ribs. She was convinced this map documented a highly sophisticated, unrecorded civilization or a geographical reality that modern science had missed entirely. This wasn't just a discovery. It was a rewrite of history. Her first 2 days with the Cartographia Obscura were a feverish blur of scanning, cross-referencing, and documenting. She set up her high-resolution imaging equipment in the cramped attic space, capturing every detail before the light or air could damage the fragile material further. She noted that many areas of the map had been deliberately scored, burned, and ink-washed to obliterate key sections, a deliberate act of erasure, precisely as the old legends hinted. Whoever had tried to wipe this knowledge away had been thorough, but not thorough enough. The indigo symbols, perhaps due to the unique properties of their ink, resisted the attempts to destroy them. It was as she was stitching together the dozens of high-resolution digital segments, revealing a vast, central island chain with a singular, radiating point at its core, that the first shadow fell. It began subtly, with the library's ancient, humming elevator grinding to a halt several floors below. Alara froze, her hand hovering over the save button on her laptop. No one ever came up to the attic. The library staff avoided the space, citing superstitions about ghosts and the cold. Then came the footsteps, not the slow, shuffling steps of an elderly librarian, but quick, purposeful, heavy steps ascending the wooden stairs. They were too fast, too deliberate. Panic, cold and sharp, pierced Alara's academic curiosity. She quickly ripped the plastic sheet off the map, carefully rolling the Cartographia Obscura back up, stuffing it into the core of a larger, inconsequential logbook, and jamming the whole thing back into the dusty corner. Her laptop, still displaying the segmented image, was slammed shut. She barely had time to stand and look nonchalant when the heavy attic door flew open, hitting the brick wall with a jarring crash that echoed through the otherwise silent building. Standing in the doorway, silhouetted against the dim stairwell light, were 2 figures. They weren't police. They weren't scholars. They were dressed in expensive, tailored gray suits that looked utterly out of place amidst the grime and history. They had the cold, unsettling posture of people who were accustomed to getting their way without asking. The leader, A tall man with eyes the color of chipped ice scanned the room, his gaze resting instantly on Alara. He didn't introduce himself or the other man, who remained silently guarding the doorway. "The map, Dr. Vance," the man said, his voice a low, gravelly whisper that nonetheless carried immense authority. "Will save us both time if you simply hand over the Cartographia Obscura now." The chilling realization hit Alara. They hadn't just guessed she might find something. They had been watching, waiting. The legends weren't just old sailors' tales. They were true. An organization, immense and terrifying, actively maintained the erasure of this history. "I'm not sure what you're referring to," Alara managed, her voice trembling despite her effort to keep it steady. She immediately regretted using the word referring. It sounded far too academic, too defensive. The man's lips curled into a faint, utterly humorless smile. "The ancient chart. The one detailing the nexus of the northern tides. You've spent 2 days documenting it. We can see the shadows of your work still clinging to the dust." He gestured dismissively toward her hastily closed laptop. The second man finally moved, a phantom of efficiency, crossing the room in 3 strides. He didn't go for Alara, but for the table where she had been working, specifically examining the stacks of maps she had discarded. He reached a hand towards the corner where the logbook lay concealed. This was it. The moment of confrontation. Alara knew that if they took the map, the knowledge would be lost forever, perhaps destroyed. The intense fear suddenly transformed into a white-hot resolve. She wasn't just defending a piece of old paper, she was defending a historical truth. With a surge of adrenaline, she grabbed the nearest heavy object, an antique brass sextant, and hurled it with all her strength at the head of the man by the corner. The metallic clang was deafening. The man cried out, momentarily stunned, allowing Alara the precious seconds she needed to dart past the stunned leader and sprint toward the attic window, her heart screaming in her chest. The game, Alara realized with a terrifying clarity, had just begun, and the prize was not just a map, but the true history of the world. Alara didn't stop running until she was several blocks away, the sounds of the harbor traffic thankfully swallowing the echoes of the men's angry shouts. She clutched the heavy logbook, the secret repository of the Cartographia Obscura, like a lifeline. The brass sextant had bought her time, but it had also escalated the situation from a quiet retrieval attempt to a full-blown chase. She was now a criminal in the eyes of whoever these cold, well-funded archivists were. She found temporary refuge in a small, cramped coffee shop, the anonymous chatter and the smell of roasting beans providing a thin, temporary shield. Unrolling the map again, she confirmed the damage. The ink smears and burns were purposeful, focused on the key geographical coordinates. The only intact elements were those mesmerizing, complex indigo geometric symbols she had seen before. She realized the destruction wasn't random. The destroyers couldn't decipher the symbols, so they focused on destroying the geographical context, hoping to render the cipher meaningless. The secret lay locked in the language of the map itself. To crack the code, Alara needed expertise far beyond her own. She needed a cryptographer, a historian of forgotten dialects, and someone she could absolutely trust. The only person who fit the description was Professor Julian Thorne, her former mentor at the university, a brilliant but notoriously eccentric scholar who had often hinted at the existence of a shadow history preserved only in codes. She decided to risk contacting him, knowing that if the others were watching her, they would certainly be watching him, too. It was a calculated risk, but the map was useless as a tightly rolled scroll of vellum. It needed to speak. She secured a cheap, windowless room at a low-end motel far from the harbor, and only then made the call to Thorne, using a burner phone she bought with the last of her emergency cash. Thorne was initially skeptical, his voice a low, rumbling stream of scholarly doubt. The Cartographia Obscura? Nonsense, Alara. A Victorian fabrication, a romantic forgery. But when Alara described the indigo alignment patterns and the nature of the deliberate erasure, his tone shifted dramatically. A sudden, sharp intake of breath, followed by a long, tense silence. "Bring it to me, child," he finally commanded, his voice now edged with a mixture of fear and excitement. "Come immediately. Do not use your car. Do not use your regular routes. And do not tell anyone, especially not your university colleagues." Alara followed his instructions to the letter, arriving at his cluttered, ancient apartment under the cloak of a heavy evening fog. The air inside smelled of old books and pipe tobacco. Thorn, thin and frail, his eyes magnified behind thick glasses, looked at the map with a religious awe. As she carefully laid the Cartographia Obscura on his large oak table, he didn't even look at Alara. His entire focus was on the indigo patterns. He spent the next 3 hours in silence, tracing the symbols with a trembling finger, muttering in forgotten languages, comparing the script to ancient Sumerian tablets and celestial charts he pulled from his vast, chaotic collection. Finally, with a weary sigh that sounded like all the air leaving an old balloon, he looked up, a terrible light in his eyes. "This is not a map of the sea, Alara," he whispered, his voice hoarse. "This is a key to a hidden timeline. The symbols represent an orbital sequence, the convergence of 3 celestial bodies that only happens once every 5,000 years. The geography you see is the Earth at that specific moment of convergence. The nexus is not a hidden city, Alara. It is a point in time where immense energy or knowledge was unleashed." Thorn explained that the language was a proto-language, predating all known writing, designed not to communicate between people, but to communicate with the cosmos. It detailed how to harness the energy of the convergence. The erasure wasn't meant to hide a place. It was meant to hide the process of harnessing that power, likely to prevent its misuse. The truth of the map was that it revealed the location of a kind of ancient cosmic power plant, a place where the veil between dimensions was thin and the resources were limitless. The implications were staggering: unlimited energy or unlimited destruction. But just as the revelation sank in, a flicker of movement in Thorn's eyes, a strange, calculating coldness, replaced the scholarly fervor. He reached for a heavy leather-bound volume near the map, ostensibly to show her a reference. As he lifted it, Alara caught the scent, not of old paper, but a faint, metallic odor and the brief glint of cold steel. She realized too late that the apartment felt too quiet, too secure. The front door had locked with an unnaturally smooth, electronic click when she entered. "You shouldn't have brought this here, Alara," Thorn said, his voice now entirely devoid of warmth, sounding like the man in the gray suit. "I've tried to erase this foolish line of research for decades. It's too dangerous to be known. The Directorate offered me a final chance at true, protected knowledge if I could contain this madness." The betrayal was a physical punch, far more debilitating than the sextant incident. Thorn was pulling a small, black device from his sleeve. It wasn't a weapon, it was a tracking beacon. Before she could react, the door burst open. Not with a crash, but with a calculated, smooth entry, revealing the ice-eyed man from the attic and 4 more of his gray-suited operatives. Alara didn't hesitate this time. Knowing the map was still the prize, she grabbed the heavy book Thorn had used as a distraction, slamming it down hard on the table. In the momentary confusion, she snatched the Cartographia Obscura, rolling it tightly around her forearm, and kicked a small, precarious stack of books toward a kerosene lamp, creating a flash of flame and a dense cloud of smoke. She scrambled over the table, using the resulting chaos as a brief, desperate cover. The betrayal was complete, but the map was still hers. She was alone now, hunted by an organization that controlled her past and betrayed by the only person she thought she could trust. Alara was now a ghost, running on pure instinct and the adrenaline fueled by betrayal. She knew that the organization, which Thorn had called the Directorate, would be able to trace the burner phone and her last known location at the motel. She ditched the phone, abandoned the motel, and moved into the city's vast, underground network of abandoned subways and service tunnels. The betrayal by Thorn had taught her a brutal lesson. Trust was a luxury she could no longer afford. The Directorate wasn't just a group of wealthy collectors. They were an insidious force woven into the very fabric of authority, using their power to sanitize history. Their goal wasn't just to hide a secret, but to maintain a fragile global stability by burying a truth they deemed too disruptive for the modern world. Hiding in the cold, echoing tunnels, using a battery-powered lamp, Alara returned to the map, studying Thorne's notes he had made before his chilling change of heart. Thorne had meticulously cross-referenced the indigo symbols with old geological reports and seismic activity readings. His analysis revealed that the nexus on the map wasn't just the location of an energy source. It was the planet's central geological fulcrum, a site where the Earth's magnetic field intersected with the celestial convergence pattern. If the ancient civilization had indeed harnessed the energy at that point, the resulting instability could have been catastrophic. It dawned on Alara. The map didn't just show where a great power was, it showed where a great power almost destroyed the world. She found a secondary layer to the intentional destruction of the map. The physical erasure marks weren't just random scorches. They were focused on locations that, according to Thorne's early findings, coincided with major, unexplained historical disasters, the sudden disappearance of ancient cultures, catastrophic floods, or devastating seismic events. The Directorate hadn't erased the map to hide a treasure. They erased it to hide the history of failure. They believed the knowledge contained within the Cartographia Obscura was a trigger, a set of instructions that, if followed, would inevitably lead to another global collapse. Their mission was one of grim paternalism, to protect humanity from its own dangerous past by ensuring the map remained unintelligible. The cold-eyed man wasn't a villain seeking power. He was a gatekeeper seeking survival, however misguided his methods. This moral complexity only intensified Alara's resolve. The Directorate had chosen censorship over informed choice. They had decided that humanity was too fragile for the truth. Alara felt the opposite. The truth, however devastating, was the only thing that could prevent history from repeating itself. If the map detailed the process of harnessing the energy, it must also detail the failures, the safeguards that were missed, the warning signs that were ignored. This knowledge was the key to moving forward, not erasing the past. She realized she couldn't just keep the map safe. She had to finish the decryption and publish the complete findings to the world. While resting in the tunnels, Alara was startled by a soft, rhythmic clicking sound echoing through the concrete. It was Morse code. Cautiously, she tracked the sound to a small, sealed utility closet. The clicks were coming from a small, sophisticated radio transceiver inside. After fumbling with the lock, she discovered a man inside, an old acquaintance, Javi Ramos, a brilliant, disgraced engineer who had been fired from a multinational energy corporation for leaking classified information about their ethically dubious projects. Javi was known as a digital nomad, a master of surveillance and counter-surveillance, and a fierce advocate for open information. Javi, initially startled, recognized Alara immediately. He had been tipped off by an anonymous source, likely a disillusioned low-level operative within the Directorate, that a historian was being hunted over a classified historical document. He had been trying to find her for 2 days. Javi, unlike Thorne, didn't want the map for its historical value. He wanted it for its digital footprint. He understood power grid architecture and how cosmic energy could be translated into usable power, or, conversely, weaponized. "They're calling you the Vellum Runner in their secure comms," Javi said, his eyes scanning the map she unfolded. "They know you're trying to decode the Nexus coordinates. But they're using old technology, firewalls, and physical surveillance. We'll fight them with the network." Javi brought the skills Alara desperately needed: the ability to vanish digitally, to cloak their communications, and, most crucially, the technical expertise to translate the map's cosmic energy equations into modern physics. They realized the final, encrypted element, the key to the precise geographical coordinates of the Nexus, was a complex harmonic resonance signature, not a simple coordinate grid. Alara had the ancient source code. Javi had the modern processing power. They were two halves of an essential team. Alara finally allowed herself a cautious moment of hope. This alliance wasn't built on past loyalty, but on a shared belief in the power of truth. The Directorate was closing in, but now, the Vellum Runner was no longer running alone. They set their sights on the map's central point, the island chain that was once the Nexus, preparing for the final, dangerous race to the heart of the secret. With Javi's technical support, Alera and the Cartographia Obscura began their journey toward the decoded location, a remote, uninhabited archipelago in the Norwegian Sea, far beyond the ordinary shipping lanes, the true nexus of the northern tides. Javi used his network of favors and digital backdoors to secure them passage on a decommissioned research vessel, sailing under the guise of an ornithology survey. The Directorate, however, was not easily fooled. Their pursuit was relentless, a chilling combination of physical trackers and advanced digital surveillance that Javi barely managed to dodge. Every move was a chess game played at global speed. The journey was a crucible, testing Alera's physical endurance and her intellectual focus. In the cramped, diesel-fumed cabin, while the North Sea churned violently outside, Javi worked feverishly to translate the final harmonic resonance signature into latitude and longitude. The original map didn't use lines of projection. It used a complex 5,000-year-old system of magnetic declination changes tied to specific constellations. Javi built a predictive model, comparing the indigo symbols to both ancient stellar records and modern data on the Earth's shifting magnetic poles. He discovered that the Nexus was only truly active, meaning the channel to the immense energy was open for a very brief window every few months. Their calculated arrival time put them just hours before the current activation window closed. As they approached the target coordinates, the surveillance intensified. On their radar, Javi spotted a sleek, unmarked high-speed patrol cutter closing in fast, unmistakably Directorate hardware. "They're not trying to stop the ship," Javi warned, his face pale in the glow of the monitor. "They're trying to intercept the Nexus window. They know if we reach it first, we might expose it." The cutter, fast and silent, was gaining rapidly. They were in a race for physical space and temporal access. Alera felt a surge of cold dread mixed with a steely, desperate determination. She knew the map's secret must not be buried again. Javi, a man of quiet, desperate ingenuity, didn't panic. He accessed the cutter's telemetry through an exploited network vulnerability, a digital whisper that would vanish without a trace. He didn't sabotage the cutter, which would reveal his hand. Instead, he initiated a false distress signal from a position 20 miles north of their current location, tagging the signal with an official-looking but fake maritime code. The cutter, designed for fast intervention, briefly veered off course to investigate the highly prioritized emergency, giving the research vessel a critical 2-hour lead, just enough time to reach the destination. The final geographical coordinates led them to a cluster of volcanic islands shrouded in perpetual fog and circled by turbulent currents. Landing was treacherous. The research vessel couldn't get close to the shallow, submerged reef system that marked the entrance to the Nexus. They had to take a small, inflatable Zodiac boat through a narrow, storm-tossed channel, the waves crashing violently over the sides. Alera clutched the Cartographia Obscura, now protected in a specially sealed, watertight case, against her chest. As they navigated the perilous waters, Alera studied the last remaining clues on the map. The central point, the ultimate destination, was marked not with a coordinate, but with a drawing, a single, impossibly deep vertical shaft leading down from the heart of the island. It was described in the proto-language as the cradle of unmaking. It wasn't just a place to harness energy, it was where the catastrophic energy release had originated thousands of years prior. The Directorate's goal wasn't to prevent a new experiment, it was to keep the final evidence of the previous disaster from being revealed to the modern world. They found the island, a desolate, windswept peak of black, volcanic rock. The only remarkable feature was a perfectly circular basin in the center, which, when they approached, revealed itself to be the entry point to the shaft. It was a flawless geometric cut, clearly artificial, plunging down into an abyss of shadow and mist. The air around the opening hummed with a low, almost subsonic vibration, the tangible manifestation of the planetary energy converging. Just as they secured the boat, the distinct, low drone of a powerful engine reached their ears. The Directorate cutter was back, having quickly realized Javi's ruse. This time, They weren't sending 2 men in suits. They were deploying an entire tactical team by helicopter. Alara looked at Javi, whose face was set in a grim mask of determination. "That humming is the Nexus opening, Alara," Javi shouted over the wind. "The window is starting. They're here to close it. We have to go down. Now." Alara nodded, her hands already on the rope ladder. The fate of all recorded history balanced precariously on the brittle vellum of the Cartographia Obscura. They descended into the cold, humming darkness of the cradle of unmaking, knowing that the final confrontation was waiting for them at the bottom. The descent into the cradle of unmaking was a dizzying plunge into geological time. The shaft walls were perfectly smooth, cut through millennia of volcanic rock by an unknown, impossibly advanced technology. The air grew warmer and drier as they dropped, replaced by the faint, coppery scent of raw energy. When their boots finally touched the solid floor, they found themselves in a vast, silent cavern, the legendary Nexus. The space was cathedral-like, illuminated by a mesmerizing, faint blue-green luminescence that seemed to emanate directly from the crystalline rock formations of the chamber itself. At the very center of the chamber lay the mechanism, a colossal, rotating stone device, intricate and terrifyingly ancient, carved with the same indigo geometry that covered the Cartographia Obscura. It was humming louder now, resonating with the energy of the celestial alignment. This was the source, the ancient cosmic power plant that had nearly ended the world. Javi immediately set up his equipment, connecting a specialized diagnostic sensor to the central stone. "The Directorate's comms are flooded," he whispered to Alara, indicating the digital noise on his tablet. "They're right above us, mobilizing to seal the shaft." Alara pulled out the Cartographia Obscura. The blue-green light of the Nexus activated the indigo symbols, making them glow with an unnerving intensity, as if the map was reading the chamber and the chamber was reading the map. She realized the map wasn't just an instruction manual, it was the safety protocol. It contained the precise counterfrequencies needed to stabilize the Nexus, not just harness it. Thorn had been right about the danger, but wrong about the solution. The solution was knowledge, not erasure. As Alara raced to find the stabilization sequence within the glowing, complex patterns, the first wave of the Directorate's team breached the chamber entrance. They were led by the ice-eyed man, who held a device that looked like a heavy-duty mining laser. "Stop, Dr. Vance," he yelled, his voice echoing violently off the crystalline walls. "That knowledge is a plague. It must be suppressed." Alara stood before the central mechanism, holding the map like a shield. "You erased the map not because it was dangerous, but because it exposed the flaws of the previous users. You bury the mistakes." The man didn't flinch. "I bury history to save the future. Look at what mankind does with fire, Dr. Vance. Imagine what it will do with the energy of the stars. We choose stability. You choose chaos." A tense, desperate standoff ensued. Javi, protected by Alara's distraction, quickly finished his analysis. "Alara, the Nexus is in a positive feedback loop. It's reactivating the system that caused the collapse. The ancient civilization didn't abandon it. They set a failsafe to prevent future alignment events from activating it again. That map is the failsafe key." The ice-eyed man raised his weapon. "Give me the vellum. I will burn the last copy." Alara made her final, critical choice. She didn't hand over the map. She used it. She quickly identified the sequence Thorn had labeled the Quiet Heart, the stabilization frequency. Javi, using her verbal instructions, rapidly input the frequency into his diagnostic equipment, translating the proto-language harmonics into an electromagnetic pulse that he projected onto the spinning stone mechanism. The blue-green light in the chamber flared blindingly, and the deafening hum of the Nexus immediately shrieked into a silence, so profound it felt like the entire world had stopped breathing. The central mechanism ceased spinning. The blue-green light vanished, leaving the chamber lit only by their headlamps. The Nexus was dormant, stabilized. They had used the knowledge of the map to neutralize the threat, proving its value as a safeguard, not a trigger. In the ensuing quiet, the Directorate team hesitated, confused by the sudden, profound silence. Their leader lowered his weapon, defeated not by force, but by the successful completion of the very act he was trying to prevent. "You fools," he muttered, his voice defeated. "You have merely delayed the inevitable. The knowledge remains." "Yes," Elara replied, carefully re-rolling the Cartographia Obscura. "The knowledge remains, and this time, it won't be erased." She realized the true power of the map wasn't the energy it detailed, but the proof it offered. The proof that human history was not a steady march, but a cycle of near extinction, and that the only way to break the cycle was to learn from the mistakes of the past. The map didn't need to be destroyed. It needed to be shared. Javi, already transmitting his full diagnostic report, including the map's stabilization sequence and the Directorate's infiltration attempts, to a dozen international news and open-source intelligence organizations, looked at Elara with tired pride. "The Vellum runner succeeded," he said. "The files are live. The Directorate can burn all the archives they want, but they can't burn the internet." Elara looked up at the perfectly circular shaft above them, now silent. The Cartographia Obscura was no longer a secret. It was now a global debate, a terrifying history lesson, and the key to a future built on the truth, however difficult that truth might be. The map they tried to erase had finally spoken, and the world was about to listen.